Any other apologies? Not that. Ola.
Just to send apologies from Colin Chick. He's on leave at the moment.
Thank you very much indeed, Ola. Are there any other apologies? Thank you. In which case, can we move to item 2 on the agenda? I will be making an announcement that may be relevant to the members of the public who are here later on, which is because of the level of progress we've made, the item that we were planning to consider in confidential session under item 5, we are now actually going to be able to consider in public session. So you don't need to leave that earlier, and depending on the progress we make on other items, I may well bring that one forward because I think it may be of particular interest to other people. We do have an apology from Andy Hadley. Hannah, you are absolutely right. Bournemouth Christchurch Pool have met with us earlier and they were unable to attend this afternoon. Moving on, could we go to item 2, which is public participation? And we've got a number of people who've submitted written questions and have had written replies. We think there's one person who wants to speak that we may have to reply to at a later date, but we've done question and answer. So can I in turn ask those who have submitted written questions and are here from the public to ask their supplementary? David Redwell.
Yeah, I suppose my supplementary is quite crude, really, and I've said it to Peninsula as well. I'm seeing all this money going north to to the Northern Powerhouse Rail, the Northern Transport Board, and the West Midlands Bureau Combined Authority, sorry, and what we call the West Midlands Railway Executive, which is the railways around the West Midlands, and quite a lot of money going into buses in the north and in the West Midlands. But I don't see that money coming to the southwest, whether that be Western Gateway or Peninsula, Chris. And it does alarm me that we've got no progress so far on even a piece of double track from Weymouth to Bristol, which is crucial for the economic development of South East Dorset and Weymouth and Yeovil. And we recently had the main line between Bristol, or you could say from Cheltenham, right the way through to Penzance, with the line closed over a series of nights and days by a storm. And the money is not being invested by the Department for Transport. Now, I don't know how we put the pressure on. We have about 16 Labour MPs, I think the same number of Lib Dem MPs, but we don't appear to have the pressure they do in the north to get the sums out of the Department for Transport that the Southwest region as a whole, even though Western Gateway Transport Board and Peninsula Transport Board almost work as one together, and that I'm very proud of. But passionately, I'm not seeing the money. And when the mayor, and Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the mayor says to me, I got £51 million this year, and last year, DFT, I had £57 million, I didn't see the DFT clip the mayor's wings in all the other combined authorities in the north for money for buses. And we also have one of the poorest coach networks with no DFT money to maintain National Express or Flixbus in our region. So mine is pretty brutal. Why are we not getting the share? And I suppose, Chris, yours and my passion is when we've got 3 accessible stations, Bodmin Parkway, Castle Carey, Yeovil Junction, Dorchester South, but Stroud, we haven't got Cheltenham under construction. Western's happening. We are not getting levels of money that the SU North, and I'd like to understand why the Department for Transport feels that the Southwest region as a whole, from Cheltenham to Penzance and down to Swindon and Bournemouth, can be deprived of cash.
David, thank you. Can I now ask James just to say a little bit about how we and Peninsula work together both lobbying and talking with Department for Transport and indeed Network Rail and National Highways about funding and investment. And then Ben, would you be willing to come in at this stage in advance of your main slot, please?
Thank you, Chris. For those who don't know me, I'm James White. I'm technical lead for the Western Gateway subnational transport body. I think in a way, David, this does reflect where we're going to be heading far more. I think with the role of the Western Gateway being more of a regional convener and advocacy type role. We've done a lot of work developing business cases for schemes like the Heart of Wessex line, with the doubling of some of the track between Castle Kerry and Yeovil Pen Mill. We've done business case work for the West of England line, Tisby Loop to improve capacity. With Dorset Council, we funded the Dorset Metro study, and then we're currently funding Westbury Bay platform study as well. And there is a need to keep taking these forward and keep the momentum going and heading more into that advocacy role, making that case for change. And this is what's in our work plan for 26-27, to really start to bring all of these schemes together to make the case for why these are key pieces of investment. And we do work very closely with Peninsula, because all of these schemes, they all have a much wider impact just within the Western Gateway region, and in particular, we are looking at doing some case for change work around the whole southern part of our geography, and that obviously overlaps into Somerset and has those links onto Exeter and beyond as well. So I suppose just in summary, what I'm saying here is we recognise the need to really press forward the very good schemes that we have. Obviously, and Ben will probably say something about this, funding nationally is very difficult and very challenging, but we think we've got good schemes and we really want to push them forward.
Ben.
I think I can only really sort of echo.
Hang on, Ben, can you introduce yourself first?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes, I will. Sorry. Yes,
Please.
I'm Ben Kemp, the Southwest area lead from the Department for Transport. And yeah, no, I absolutely recognise the challenges in the Southwest around connectivity and so on. It is a challenge, and I think it's fair. I mean, the government has committed a huge amount of funding for all types of transport over the next 4 years within this spending review period. And from a rail perspective, I echo what James said there, because I think it's important to keep this collaboration going in terms of putting forward key business cases and really keeping Southwest on the map when it comes to sort of rail connectivity and so on. So yeah, completely recognise the challenges on that. From a buses perspective, I mean, we've continued with the funding for a 4-year period now to give certainty to local transport authorities right across the country, including in the Southwest. Some parts of the Southwest have done very well on bus funding, and there's also been a tweaking to the formula as well, following feedback from local authorities around the rural side, because obviously rural is a key part of Southwest as well. I mean, I can't really sort of give examples on the rail side, I suppose, in terms of the difference between the Southwest and the North. I think everyone has a different view on that, and all I can really advise the STB to do is to continue the work that it's been doing, because it is very, very valuable. The strategic implementation case and so on has been a very valuable resource. So I think just keep that going, and if there is a sort of specifics on rail that you want me to sort of take away to our rail team, I'm very happy to do that.
We'll take you up on that one later, Ben, if we may. Thank you both very much. The next speaker is, I think, Rosa. Rosa Kell?
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm happy with the responses that you've given me, but I would like to ask one supplementary question, slightly different from what I had there. Cross-border multi-operator ticket. I believe Operation Coral. I don't know if it's on the agenda. Is that something that you're working with? It's very important that, especially at this time when so many bus operators are truncating their lines, their services, which means that passengers will have to change from one operator to another, from one bus to another, to be able to complete their journeys. And of course, it becomes very expensive at £3 a time. Without this cross-operator ticket, I'd appreciate any comment that someone would like to make as to how that progress is going.
James, do you want to start? But I anticipate some of the unitary authority leads may wish to come in on that, or indeed somebody from the combined authority.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Operation Coral is the for those who don't know, this is the sort of the back office approach, whereby if you have a tap on tap off card, you'll be able to use it anywhere in the country, and the back office calculates all the repayment sums and enables us, really basically one travel card for the whole of the country. We have previously been asked to help local authorities to bring together the information that's needed for this project. We haven't had the resources to be able to do that. We have been involved with Midlands Connect, who have been the main STB leading on this project, but so we haven't really had the resources to go out to help local authorities compile all the information about which operators have what type of system, what are their needs, what extra infrastructure is going to be provided. So we remain, very supportive of this proposal, and it was going to be part of our proposed bus work for 26-27, but because we have less funding than we had expected, that's one of the areas of work we've had to put on hold. But that might be a decision, Chair, for the board to look at again, how the STB can help support the rollout of Project Coral.
Are there any officers from any of the constituent authorities who'd like to comment, or are you comfortable with that reply for the moment? It's a really, really important question, the through ticketing one, and it drives everybody around the twist. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of the authorities on the STB to say, Rosa, we're completely with you in wanting to get solutions that work within areas between different companies as well as cross-border. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Are there any other...
Disappointing, but thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other public questions? Any other public questions I've missed? Ben, you've got your hand up.
I was just going to say, for Rosa there, I mean, I can take away an action point to, to find out the latest on Project Coral. And what I would say is that I know Peninsula Transport colleagues have also been in touch with our Project Coral leads this end as well. I think that was sort of towards the end of last year, to see if there's any sort of early work that could be done across the peninsula on this. So it's worth sort of checking in with them as well. I don't think Hannah's on the call today, but she'd know a little bit more on that, because I know she met directly with my colleague on the buses team on that. But yeah, I'm more than happy to take away an action to to just check in on the sort of the latest progress that's being made and get the latest lines for everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, not least because across this region, very often the local authority boundaries don't fully map onto the economic activity zones, the travel to work zones, the travel to hospital zones, or indeed the travel to education zones. We have a lot of cross-boundary movements for all sorts of reasons. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who have tabled questions or wish to ask a supplementary? Stick your hand up now. In which case, thank you very much. Can we move on to the main agenda? Members, I wonder, would you... Oh, Christina, hello.
Hello, I did actually submit a statement.
Yeah.
Did you receive that?
Yes, the statement has been received, but we don't then repeat the statement. We ask for supplementary questions.
Okay, Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd just like to understand from Network Rail, if they're here. We're very, very keen that the Avonmouth Freight Terminal really shouldn't go ahead unless you really are going to put the Northeast Chord in, as detailed in our statements. We're very concerned about the effect that just putting a freight terminal in just like that will have on passenger services. I think we just like an assurance that you're going to try and incorporate the Northeast Chord in with the costings and produce it, because I don't think that's actually part of the central proposal. I think I raised this last time, and I think at that point you said, well, yes, we're aware, but we really would like you to work up what that would look like in terms of benefit cost ratio and all of that. We're really not happy with just putting a freight terminal in there, because we're very keen to get a connection between Henbury East and Severn Beach. I mean, obviously it's not in Metro West Phase 2 right now, but it should be. And let's not put a freight terminal in there, which will stymie any chance of doing that in the future.
I think, can I reply on behalf of the STB? If you look at the proposed work plans, technical programme update, and after the next item, which will be about the future structure and work plan of the STB, you will see that the freight work is likely to be moving into a slightly different leadership and governance model, so that it will still be of regional significance, but we are in discussion about whether it should move to a WECA-led process or otherwise. So I think your points have been made. They are factored into the system, and just wait and see what the next stage becomes.
That's great, because we've actually tackled WECA about this already, so great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've now got A. Nicholson.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Andrew Nicholson from Wiltshire Climate Alliance, where I lead the transport topic group. My question is only this. If the previous speaker says that they've submitted a statement, where can we read that statement, please? Because I don't think it was with the agenda papers.
No, they are published. They are normally published before the meeting, but I think you weren't here at the beginning when I explained that the chief officer is unwell, and unexpectedly seriously unwell. So a few things like for example, the public link to speak at the meeting have come out a little late, and there are apologies for that, but they are trying to sort of pick up bits and pieces, pick up the pieces. James, do you want to?
Yeah, we will
confirm?
we will put all the statements and the responses on the website. Hopefully we can do it during the course of this meeting, so it will be there for everyone to see. Normally, as Chris says, we would have had that up online before the meeting, so yeah, apologies for not having that in place beforehand.
Thank you. I was sorry to hear that Alan Creedy's unwell, and I look forward to being able to get access to that statement. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. If there's no more questions, what I'm going to suggest to members they may wish to do you wish to proceed with items 3 and 4 and then take the paper that was going to be in confidential session, or do you feel it would be more logical to take that paper about the future structure and operation and funding of the STB first, so that the technical paper and the finance update are on the back of that? I'm entirely in your hands. And the board sits there silently.
I have no view on that, Chris.
Thank you for speaking. In which case, what I'm going to do, I think, is carry on with the agenda as it is, and then allocate time at the end for that last item. Can we therefore move on to paper B, which is James? Remembering that we've had longer on questions than we normally would, James.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, paper B is really just the usual programme update on where we are with all of our various work streams, how much we've done since the last meeting. Mena's just brought up a couple of slides just to illustrate this. Paper B does have the full list of what we've been doing since April last year, for those who want to go back and have a look at everything else that's happened during the course of those months. So just a very quick run through some of our key areas. Freight, we've been working very closely with Peninsula Transport on our freight forum, and took part in an event with Logistics UK back in January. We've also been undertaking some surveys with operators about what they need from local authorities. So we've got lots of good research coming out of that. On the rail side, the Westbury Platform Zero work is nearing completion. We're expecting the final report next month, and we'll come back to the board on that. That's looking very positive. That's work that's jointly funded by ourselves and Wiltshire Council. Going on in the background at the moment, there are these plans for the Bath Wiltshire Metro, so we will keep engaging with the Connected Cities catapult on that piece of work, and we're looking at doing a rail case for change document as well, which I mentioned a bit earlier in terms of David's question about really making the case for rail investment in the southwest. On electric vehicles, our next EV Officers Forum is taking place in March, and we have our Coach Forum, which is happening on this Friday, with people from the coach industry, local authorities and other key stakeholders. The Centre of Excellence work, particularly around our spatial planning tools, has been going on. We've been doing some training with all our local authority officers, and we're looking at undertaking some planned upgrades, as well as providing continued support for that. And just a quick flag up, the tool has been shortlisted for a National Transport Decarbonisation Award. So fingers crossed on that one. And then on the resilience side of the work, that's progressing. There's a lot of mapping work currently being undertaken, looking at all the various climate change resilient risks that are there across the whole of our region. And we're going to be engaging with local authorities and key stakeholders on taking that forward. And then just very briefly, we have all our rural mobility work. If you go to the next slide, please, Mena. Oh, yes, so Hannah's just pointing in the chat, the Coach Forum is this Friday. It's not 27th of March. It is definitely this Friday. Yeah, so rural mobility pilots, this work is going very well. We're coming to the end of the first 3 projects that the Western Gateway grant funded. That's one in Bridport to West Bay, a shuttle bus, marketing campaign for the Robin Demand Responsive Transport Scheme in Gloucestershire, and then the Forest of Dean Mobility Shared Car Club and e-bike hire. And then we've got 3 new projects funded out of this year's budgets, which is a Friday to Saturday night bus service linking Lyme Regis and Bridport. A scheme that's going to be looking at combining real-time parking data with coach tour operator. This is to reduce visitor pressure and support more sustainable access in the Cotswolds. And then the third project is supporting the rural mobility projects in southeast Dorset, identifying targeted solutions. So those are all about to kick off. Peninsula also have got their schemes as well. So actually by the time all of these schemes have been completed, we will have had 10 across the 2 STBs, 10 rural mobility pilot schemes, which I think is quite an achievement. And then the recommendation, Chair, is just simply to note the progress that's been outlined in the update report.
Thank you, James. Oh, somebody's clapping. That's lovely. Yes. Can I ask if members have any questions or comments that they wish to make on that report? It's a lot of work, and it's showing the value of collaboration and partnership. Sarah?
I just wondered if someone is able to explain what the role of the Western Gateway on EVs is that is different from the roles of the constituent transport authorities. Thanks.
Yep. I suppose our main role here is bringing together everyone across the southwest. And actually, the EV, I should have mentioned, is the EV forum is a joint one with Peninsula. So we're bringing together EV officers from all those authorities. It's a very useful forum for everyone to share what's going on in their part of the world. It's sharing common concerns and issues. It's also an opportunity for key speakers like the Energy Savings Trust to come and talk to everybody en masse. So we're not doing any detailed work coming out of it. Our role here is much more as just as a convener, bringing everyone together to share those common issues and share best practice and knowledge. Tim, who is the officer who serves on that, I don't know if Tim, if you want to add anything more to that on the EV officers.
Yeah, I think you've pretty well covered it there, James. Yeah, we bring guest speakers in and ways forward, discuss potential solutions to problems that they face. It's very much of a come together and share learnings to prevent mistakes being copied elsewhere.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Warren, is that satisfactory?
Lovely, thank you, very helpful.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions? If not, can we... there is, yes. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, you mentioned the interchange guidance and active travel, social value and health guidance. Is there any facility for people like me to be able to see this guidance?
Can I take that one?
Yes, I was going to say, Hannah, would you like to take it?
They aren't fully complete yet, but in due course they will be published on our website. It's anticipated. The health and social value tool, though, is it's effectively a spreadsheet tool to be used by local authority officers for evaluation of specific schemes. So from that perspective, is likely to be of limited use or interest to people who are not in the business of developing schemes for implementation. But the interchange guidance is more broad than that, and may well be of more interest.
I was particularly interested.
Caroline, Caroline, I'm sorry, but public question time is finished. I gave you that little bit of so normally we don't take input from the public.
I apologise.
Meeting. It's all right. It's not your fault for not knowing, but I gave a little bit of leeway, but I need to kind of stick within the rules. So thank you for the question, and hopefully you can keep in touch about how that develops and see it when it's published. Martin Smith from Wiltshire.
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested in the DRT marketing campaign that was mentioned in the rural mobility pilots. Obviously, it says that it's producing insights useful for rural DRT schemes, and we have 3 of those in Wiltshire at the moment, which we are trying to sort of promote more heavily now. I'm just wondering, can we access those insights? Are they, excuse my ignorance, but are they available somewhere for us to sort of potentially learn from?
I'll take that one as well, if that's all right, Chair. Yeah, they will be in due course. So that scheme itself comes to an end at the end of March, and then there's an evaluation and monitoring process that will take place during April, which will result in a final report that will draw that together. This particular campaign is sought to engage 2 key audiences, really. One is younger people who typically underuse DRT, and the other is to do with access to green spaces, so from urban areas out into rural. So those will be the 2 market areas focused on in that report, and if that's of use to you in Wiltshire, that would be excellent. So we will share the outputs from that when they're completed.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. They would be of interest, I think, because we are finding from our own usage, we originally thought that the main demographic for our DLT schemes was going to be the sort of more elderly sector of the population, but we are finding that uptake amongst the younger people who obviously sort of can't drive or don't have cars at the moment is far more than we expected. So yeah.
Oh, well, that's really positive then, because I think the typical hurdle is young people not realizing it's different from community transport and is available for all types of users. So yeah, that's really positive to hear.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I ask whether there are any further questions or comments from members of the committee? Please. If not, can I say thank you? And I'm sorry, members of the public, we are now in the formal business session of the meeting, and it's no longer public question participation. So you're welcome to mail in any further queries you have arising from the meeting, or indeed put them in the chat and they will get picked up. Can I now move on then to paper C, which is Mina giving us the finance update?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just sharing the screen there on finances. I will start with sort of a summary of, where we are financially at the end of Q3. We do have just under 1 million of total funding this financial year, as we all know, and by the end of December, we had spent just over 628k there. That level of spend is sort of consistent with our delivery profile, as we only pay for technical work once sort of the milestones are completed. So the expenditures actually doesn't move in a straight line across the year. We do expect spend to increase in the final quarter as our work reaches completion and invoices are submitted. So just looking at the next month really for those invoices to come through. So looking ahead, we're sort of forecasting year-end expenditure of just under 783k there. As you can see from the bar chart, that leaves us with a remaining balance and sort of contingency of just above 213k. So this gives us sort of the resilience to manage any emerging risk and respond to pressures across the program delivery if needed before the end of the financial year. So turning to sort of the spending cost there, year to date for spending around the staff. The staffing is just around 450k. We have seen some of recent staff departures from there, so that creates an underspend in the budget line by year end. So that underspend we feed into the sort of the overall position for the year. On the technical program side, spend to date is just under 200k. And that actually sort of reflects the fact that much of the work is being delivered in-house by Western Gateway officers, which sort of helps us to manage external consultancy cost, as it were. So the key areas of sort of activities this year include the development of the spatial planning tool that James was kind of updating about just now, the rail freight feasibility study, the Westbury Platform Zero work, rural mobility pilots, along other sort of program packages. On our forecast technical spend for the full year is around 232k. As I mentioned earlier, this profile is kind of milestone based. So it doesn't actually spread evenly throughout the year. So if we look at the composition of our actual spend so far, we can sort of see in the bar chart there, the majority of the spend sits within the operational expenditure. Looking within the category there, the largest drivers are more of staff costs, the business operations and overheads included. So the technical program spend account for kind of smaller share at this stage of the year, reflecting both the in-house delivery and the milestone-based payment structure. So the remaining proportion, which represents sort of the contingency and the unallocated balance there, it is quite small compared to the other spend, although this may slightly change in the next reporting period, because we do have some upcoming pieces of work around the spatial planning tool being upgraded. So we have to use from that contingency to buffer up those extra pieces of work in doing that upgrade work. So in summary, our finances have been managed, spending is aligned with sort of the delivery expectations, and we're sort of forecasting our overall underspend against the total available fund that we have this financial year, but we'll continue to review and kind of update the position as we move through to the final quarter, which is the end of next month, and we'll report back to the board in the next meeting. That's all for me for finance update. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members for Mina? Given that very thorough report and the written report, can I just publicly say thank you to her for managing finances in what has been a time of fairly significant change, and has resulted in quite a lot of rebudgeting and reprofiling. And I think we should be grateful for the speed and patience with which she's dealt with that. So thank you, Mina. Are there any other questions on that paper or comments on that paper? If not, can we move to item 4? This is where we have updates from our associates. Unfortunately, neither Network Rail nor National Highways are able to be here today, and that's a matter we will be pursuing with them to ensure they are at the next meeting. But we do have Ben Kempner from DFT. Ben, do you want to do a short introduction, and then I'm sure members of the committee will have questions?
So yeah, as you know, I'm Ben Kempner from the DFT Southwest Area Engagement Lead. So I'll just go through the main headlines from DFT over the last few months since our last board meeting. Starting off with the new connectivity tool that was launched a couple of months ago. This is a web-based tool that was sort of set up to help professionals and planners in England and Wales give schemes a connectivity score, and it also helps them better map out their schemes for locations that are close to essential services, helping them to sort of place them in areas that are better connected and easily accessible through active travel, for example. And it uses a clear evidence-based standard as well. And the idea is that it will ensure that new homes, jobs and services are located where they can be accessed by people with, good connectivity to transport, with, plenty of options available. So it's definitely a useful tool that's been brought out. Shortly after that, the demand responsive transports guidance was issued on gov.uk, and alongside that also there's an impact evaluation for phase 2 of the Rural Mobility Fund monitoring and evaluation process. So that fits in quite nicely with some of the work that Western Gateway have been doing on the rural pilots as well. There is a mailbox within DFT, which is the drt@dft.gov.uk mailbox, should anyone have any sort of comments on the demand responsive transport guidance, or indeed anything else related to demand responsive transport. So please do feel free to provide feedback. I'm more than happy to sort of send that on people's behalf as well. Quite a lot of work still going on around the EV side of things as well. So hauliers and fleet operators were given additional discounts up to £120,000 on new electric trucks. This was part of an 18 million funding announcement by the government back in January to increase the plug-in truck grant until March of this year. And it's actually part of a much wider programme of £318 million for green freight, which is looking to help British businesses slash upfront costs on new lorries, and also helping them to access the lower running costs as well, and obviously also helping to reduce emissions and costs at the same time. It's quite similar to the electric car grant that's also been pretty successful. Certainly over 50,000 people have benefited from that, which allows people to get around £3,750 off an electric car when making the switch over. So plenty of encouragement on that. And I'm going to jump ahead slightly because there's we've also sort of more recently introduced the Get That Electric Feeling campaign, which was launched on the 19th of January. And again, just sort of encouraging people through TV and radio ads and so on, and digital outlets as well, to highlight those opportunities to make savings when going across to and making the switch to electric vehicles. So there's a real push for that at the moment, for a much wider program, and trying to make it easy as possible for people to do that. And obviously, you know, I have regular conversations with the local authorities in the southwest about how things are going on the sort of the Levi work and the cross pavement channel work as well, and understand, you know, obviously there are a number of challenges behind that, so it's good to keep those conversations going. The other thing as well I mentioned in the last session was some legislation that was actually very out of date. About 40 years ago, the invalid carriage regulations were introduced. These are actually laws around powered mobility devices, including electric wheelchairs and mobility scooters, and looking at how these can be modernised. So a 12-week consultation was launched at the beginning of January, inviting users, members of the public, accessibility organisations, etc., to share views on how those outdated pieces of legislation should be modernised to reflect the technology that's in place at the moment and ensure that it's safe to use as well. So really important bit of legislation there that's being worked on at the moment. The pavement parking consultation also was launched some time ago, and we've now had the government response as well to that 2020 public consultation. And the options for change went live on the 9th of January. We're doing a lot of work at the moment with our policy leads on that one, and local authorities as well, to see if anyone's interested in sort of looking at sort of early adoption. And there'll be some secondary legislation that's planned to be launched later in the year as well, to enable local authorities to enforce against unnecessary obstruction of the pavement. And certainly had some really interesting conversations with local authorities on that, because it's one of those ones that's quite a difficult topic to address, and it's not something that you can just sort of give a blanket ban on. It's something that you've got to think about really, really carefully, depending on what the area looks like, and you know, and also looking at the impacts on residents as well. So we're going to continue those conversations going forward. And just a couple of other bits to mention as well. Floating bus stops guidance was issued recently on gov.uk. What I'll do is just pop that into the chat for anyone who hasn't had a chance to see it, just in case it's of interest. That's going in there now. And also the bus franchising manual came out quite recently as well, which is advice to local authorities on the bus franchising process. So I'll just pop that in there as well. And just to let you know as well that the enhanced partnership manual and guidance is still being produced at the moment, and that should be on its way pretty soon as well. So lots of work going on buses at the moment as well. And finally, I just wanted to mention the Structures Fund survey. So you've probably all heard about the Structures Fund that was announced at the spending review last year. Quite a bit of money going into looking at the renovation and repairs of structures such as bridges and so on. And I think the difference here is that we're actually sending out a survey which gives local authorities an opportunity to provide feedback about how they see that fund working, how many schemes are viable in their area, you know, and actually putting forward sort of, you know, volumes as well, which is going to be really, really interesting as well, and very insightful. So really important bit of work. We're asking local authorities to complete one survey per local authority, just to make sure that it's consistent and we're just getting one message from each authority. Absolutely encourage everyone to complete that. So that's the main headlines from the last few months.
Ben, thank you very much. That was a very rapid gallop through an enormous amount of stuff that's going on. I've got questions coming in. I'm going to take the liberty from the chair of raising 3 initial ones, please. Firstly, when are we going to get lots of stuff there about when stuff is coming through? When are we going to get the detail on the criteria for the spending of the bus grants, in terms of,
right, okay,
because
yeah,
that is holding us all back, and there have been parliamentary
Yeah.
questions and we're still waiting. The second one
Yeah.
is in relation to your bridges study. Are you looking at the impact of the switch to EV buses on bridge loadings. I know in some parts of this region that's having on rural bridges that have otherwise got weight limits that mean they are okay as they are, changing bus route. It's holding up the changing of bus routes to electric because we've got too many bridges that need a bit of work. And then thirdly, there's a question in the chat about when we're going to be getting the speed limit guidance.
Right. So the bus grant letter, as far as I'm aware, it's due very, very soon, but I'm going to take an action away and check that for you. I don't know is the honest answer on the speed limits guidance. Obviously, we've only just published the road safety strategy, so I'd imagine it's going to be sort of, you know, a kind of a supplement to that, but I will check that and take that away as an action point. So that's the speed limit guidance. And the bridges one, well, I don't know if there's any work that's been done specifically on that, but what I would probably encourage local authorities to do as part of that survey, there are some free text spaces within that, and it might be an opportunity there to sort of, you know, include that in there as part of, you know, it could be quite a concern for a number of local authorities. I understand that there are sort of weight sort of concerns and things like that. I think if it's, you know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because if it's a matter of sort of changing the structure completely, that might be a slightly different sort of question. But I think it's worth putting that in there as part of the survey. I would definitely recommend that, because this is a real opportunity for local authorities to engage with us as a department on a particular issue. So that would be my advice on that one.
Thank you very much. Joe, Councillor Andrews had his hand up and he's taken it down. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. That was really comprehensive report. I'm interested in the comments you made about the Levi work. Obviously, we're sort of got a separate project in progress at the moment in Wiltshire, and I'd be interested to know what sort of insights or issues you're picking up from talking to other, you know, other authorities on that work.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think there's a variety of different sort of issues in terms of, you know, in some cases, if you're going to put up a sort of an on-street charger, for example, you know, people might take your space, as it were. So if it's technically been put for your property, but then in the day you go out to work and then someone's actually taken the space. So that's something we've certainly picked up quite a lot on. I think we've seen some vandalism of EV chargers in some areas, and so I've reported that back to the EV policy team. And I think probably, I guess that the biggest one is sort of just the kind of getting the message out there for people, you know, trying to kind of put it forward that it's, you know, it's more convenient and that kind of thing. It's quite difficult to convince people to make that change, I think. And it's different across different, you know, areas as well. So I think if you get to the point, you know, where local authorities are, I think people are sort of saying, you know, that they're not ready to make that change. I think that's happening in some areas, but in other areas it's kind of a little bit different depending on what the infrastructure sort of viability is in terms of, you know, road space and, you know, and just the geography more generally. So it's very varied right across a number of different areas. But what I would certainly say is that, you know, I always would encourage local authorities to feedback anything about the Levi programme or anything to do with the pavement channel work that's going on, because it's something that, you know, we recognise that it's quite a challenging programme, and, you know, I think we need to know how people are getting on with it, and that, you know, any feedback that you've got is really, really useful because it helps us as well. So very, very happy to, you know, to take on any feedback from anybody about that and pass that on to the relevant policy team. So
if I could just follow up on that, I was just wondering whether other authorities are finding issues with the actual electricity supply as well, because obviously that, particularly for higher powered chargers, that's a big issue for even for the private sector as well. So I don't know whether that's being flagged as a particular issue or not.
Not so much on the Levi side, perhaps a little bit when it comes to bus depots and things like that. Perhaps
Yeah.
more so from that side, I would say. Sort of, connectivity to the grid, and I think that's sort of recognised as being quite a major challenge in taking things forward. So yeah, we're certainly on our radar, that one. But yeah, I would probably say more for buses than for electric vehicles at this point. That said, if it is a problem, then please do let us know, because I can take that away and feed that back. It's really important.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Plowden.
Hi, thanks, Ben. Really useful stuff. There was a bit. There was rankings, red, amber, green rankings issued around maintenance, and wasn't really much dialogue before they were put out. I think quite a lot of local authorities had some concerns about this. Our particular concern was that we had a couple of questions, I think, which were: do we use a particular system for assessing the state of our roads and the sort of rate of deterioration? And we were in dialogue about 2 or 3 years ago about using a much better, more sophisticated system, which we now do. It gives us much more information. And the department said, yeah, that's a really good idea. We're happy to endorse that. So when we were asked to use this system, we ticked no on I think 2 different boxes, and were marked down because of that. And I think our maintenance officers are feeling particularly bruised by the fact that they've gone to a higher standard, but been marked down for using not using a lower standard when that was agreed by a previous DFT official. So I think there's a particular grievance there, but I think I heard quite a lot of concerns across the country about the way that was handled by the DFT.
Sure.
So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say about that and how you might be changing things in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think, this is the first time we've done something like this. And I mean, you're always going to get sort of, teething problems with this. But I think we've absolutely learned a few lessons from the communication side. That's been talked about, by virtually every local authority that I've spoken to. We've completely recognised that. It's been fed back to the relevant teams. Not using it as an excuse, but they are a very, very small team of people, so there is always a challenge there around resources. But I think, there had been some communications that have come out previously, certainly sort of 6 months in advance, and then again more recently. But I think we absolutely recognised that, there were the difficulties of sort of having the report coming out on a Sunday was not seen as ideal, and I totally get that. And I think, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that, and things will be looked at and reviewed, evaluated, and probably done, in a different way next time. Always a risk, I think, when you do it for the first time. So the feedback, again, really, really important. It's really important we know how you're feeling on that one. I think, for things in terms of the sort of the form, not the formula, but the kind of the ratings themselves, please do ask your colleagues to write in to me about that, and I can forward that concern on, because that's quite a specific one, which is not something I'm not too close to the detail on that, but it's something I can certainly follow up for you. So please do ask them to get in touch with us on that one.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Wyborn. You're on mute, Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a question about cross pavement gully charging channels, or two. I've really got two questions, but they are linked. It's what is holding us up, and I suspect holding up a lot of authorities, is that we have grants which are available for subsidy to the public for as an incentive to put in the channels towards the capital cost, but we've got no resource or revenue grant for setting it up and providing the necessary sort of organisation to do it, or indeed researching how we should go about it, which kind of segues into my next question, where there seem to be a range of views around, if I can put it that way, about how light touch or heavy touch the authorities' regulation needs to be, whether it's something which you can sort of I'll kind of caricature this a bit, just sort of put out to the private sector and give them way leave to dig up the pavement, or whether we need to spend quite a lot of time and effort on design and electrical safety and all the things that go with it in order to make it work and make it happen. And obviously local authorities by their nature have to be a bit risk averse, and we don't want fires and electrocutions and all those kind of things. So I'm just really wondering whether there is any sort of steer from the DFT on how local authorities should be going about this task.
I think, Ben, behind that is a slightly bigger question, which is sometimes we all get really frustrated with DFT because you're micromanaging us in a way that we don't think we need micromanaging. Here, it's an example of a number of situations where actually being clearer in what was to be done and how it was to be done might have actually saved a great number of wheel reinventions going on all over the country.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think these are all good points, and I think the second point that you made there about the sort of, how kind of flexible can you be in terms of procuring it out to various sort of companies and so on, and or whether people can, the public can actually do it themselves and things like that is obviously one that I raised as a sort of a health and safety issue at the time, because I'm one of the local authorities that's kind of fed that back to us. I haven't got the response with me at the moment, just looking through my folder, but I'll take that away as an action and bring that, give you that response separately. I think that's a really good point. I mean, funding wise, I mean, obviously we haven't got any more money for the spending review at the moment. There was, as far as I'm aware, that there is still Levi revenue grant coming through. That's part of the, the consolidated settlement. So as far as I know, that's still happening for sort of capability and capacity. And the actual Levi capital grant, as far as I'm aware, is a sort of more of a one-off one as part of that program. But I think there is still some capability money coming through. What I'd probably recommend is, and actually we talked earlier about the combined sort of work of Western Gateway and Peninsula on the Levi side of things, and so trying to link up in that way as well and sharing some best practice on that side. In terms of, what's worked well in some areas, what hasn't worked so well in others. I would probably take it through that because I think that's really important, that you keep that kind of dialogue going and collaboration between the local authorities. That's definitely very, very important. So I'd keep maintaining that. As I said, I mean, there is still some capability and capacity funding available to local authorities as part of the grants. So hopefully, that can still be used going forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Your next set I'll say your next set of questions, Ben, is from Councillor Andrews, unless Councillor Wyville wants to come back with a supplementary.
No, that's fine. I'll take that back to Gloucestershire and see what they know about using Levi funding. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Just to remark on what you've just been talking about, I don't see the problem as the channels. I see the problem as the road space, because it's a public road space, and we're going to have to do lots of TROs to say only EV vehicles can park in this one because this person owns the electricity coming out of this house. Difficult one, very difficult one, especially in market towns that I live in, where there's rows and rows of terraced houses with no parking spaces in the front. That's a difficult one. I don't know how we're going to solve it, but that's for later times. Well, what I wanted to ask about was the DFT funding for the Southwest, the Great Western Western Gateway, the STB, which is 450,000. But we understand that there's a review in the middle of that, which doesn't assist our budgeting at all. So I'm just concerned that what is that review, and what method does that review take to say, well, you got 225,000, but we might cancel the rest for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the intention. I think it's just part of sort of 2 instalments. You know, I mean, as far as we're concerned, you know, the work of Western Gateway continues, and you know that shouldn't be you know, a hindrance. It's not something that I sort of say we're going to hold back the money. You know, I think obviously we'd do a review at the time and just check that everything is progressing. But you know, I mean, as long as you go, you know, with the program that you've sort of set out in the you know, in the proposal, that there shouldn't be any issues with that at all. And we would, I think, you know, my job as a sponsor would be to sort of say halfway through, you know, look, I'm not happy with this or I'm not happy with that, so that you've at least got fair warning to do that. I mean, you know, it's yeah. I think
thanks for the clarification.
That's okay. No problem at all.
Tim, did you want to come back on the EV question, and then Martin, and that's going to be the last question, I think.
Thanks,
So
Chris.
Tim, then Martin.
I was just going to echo Ben really to say that to Councillor Wyborn that gullies and EV parking issues, and again to Councillor Andrews, TROs, they're all questions that come up at the forum. So please push the forum to your officers. I think Gloucester come along. Councillor Andrews, I can't remember what authority you are, I'm afraid.
Dorset.
Dorset, Dorset definitely come along, are very vocal and bring their experience and questions along. So we do address those questions and help each other out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I was going to come back on that subject, just to say what we're intending to do in Wiltshire, which might be useful to others. I mean, we're going to use our own contractor to book cross pavement channels because it's in the highway. So we're going to retain responsibility for that. We're going to offer it initially as a service to residents, initially subsidised, but later on we may very well charge the full cost to us. And we're not going to use TROs to enforce any rights on the road, because we're going to make it clear to residents that the road space isn't theirs and it's their risk. If there's somebody else parking there, that's too bad. So that's the approach we're taking. Rightly or wrongly, we'll see what happens as we implement it.
Thank you very much indeed. Ben, I think that's all for you for the minute, but you will want to stay for the next item.
I'll just pop in the demand responsive transport guidance as well. I forgot to put that in the chat, and I will also put in the DRT email address for any local authorities that want to contact us. So that'll be in there in a second for you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, we don't have a report from Network Rail, but we do have a written one from National Highways, which will be circulated and will go onto the website with the other papers. If that is all on that item, we now move to what was mysteriously billed as item 5, exclusion of the press and public. And I need to explain a little bit about that by way of introduction. This is the paper looking at the future of the STB and, frankly, whether we want to take the government money to assist us with continuing, and if so, what work we want to continue doing. It had a number of implications that needed to be discussed in confidential session, but we were really keen as members to get this into the public domain as a conversation, and I'm really pleased that over the last few days our conversations have reached the point where it is clear that we can have this conversation this afternoon in public, because that feels more accountable and more transparent. So I appreciate for the public that means we will be talking about paper you have not yet received, but it will be going up into the public domain. I thought that was better than simply leaving it in the whole thing in private. So this is better than the alternative solution, to which all members agreed, for which I'm very grateful. The purpose of the paper is to look at whether we want to accept the DFT grant, what would then follow in terms of how we would manage our funding and our work plan. And then at the end, we've got a separate item, which is part 4 of this paper, which is about its implications for the STP and SIP process. What I'm going to do is ask James White to introduce those first 3 items, the grant, the budget, the work programme, briefly, and then we'll have a discussion and take a decision on those items, and then we'll move on to what we think is the best thing to do with the SIP. Is that okay, folks? If so, James, can you introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have got just a few slides which might, I think, help people who aren't aware of what's in the paper. It will help promote understanding. Mena, could you just bring up those slides if you could? That would be very helpful. Thank you. Just a very quick recap, first of all. Back in September, the Department for Transport announced that STB's funding would end in March 2027. We were asked to produce a work plan and a funding ask, and that was approved by the board back in December and submitted. And we had an ask for 600,000. In terms of the work plan, there's 3 key themes around coordination, prioritisation, linkages and strategic partnerships, but also very much about keeping the regional transport conversation going. Yes, we recognise there are going to be new foundation strategic authorities and mayoral combined authorities coming along, but that is still several years potentially away. So keeping that conversation, keeping all the local authorities together and tackling regional transport issues. Department for Transport confirmed funding of £450,000 at the end of January. That's less than we had asked for, but it does give us the opportunity to programme, to plan for 2 years, 26, 27 and 27, 28. And it gives us that certainty for going forward. We do have a slightly revised budget for 26, 27. It will be made up of the 450,000 from the Department for Transport, the local authority contributions of 188,000, and we're going to put in £78,000 from our contingency to give us an overall budget of £716,000. And the diagram on the right shows it's roughly a 50-50 split between staff and organisational costs and funding for projects and early business case developments. I will just very briefly mention that one of our authorities, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, due to the financial position they're in, have been unable to provide a contribution for 26-27. We don't have any provisions in our constitution to cover for this, so we are going to put in place a protocol for managing that sort of situation, and we'll be bringing that back to the next board meeting. Just on to the next slide, please, Mena. We are making a few savings as a result of this. We have had one officer leave and another officer will be leaving at the beginning of March. We are looking at various options to replace that gap in the resources. So that's just an indication of potential recruitment or secondment or bringing in consultant support to make sure we can fully deliver that work plan. And in terms of the work plan, if we just go on to the next slide, please, Mena. This is an updated version of the plan that was submitted to the Department for Transport. It is very much about moving towards a new regional convener and advisory role. For 26-27, it's funded, as I mentioned, by Department for Transport, local authority contributions, and a top-up from our contingency budget. And then as we go forward into 27-28, it's using the money we have in reserve with the possibility, and I only say possibility, of further contributions from the local authorities. We are, as I mentioned, putting some areas of work on hold for now, but the core elements of work very much still continuing, particularly around rail and the strategic transport plan, the strategic investment plan, but also moving on into the advisory and advocacy role, which we talked about a bit earlier on during the public statements and questions. We've got a 10-point action plan, which I won't particularly dwell on, which is in the next slide. We're already doing most of these, but this is all the things we need to do to take us forward into 26, 27, and then beyond into 27, 28. So I think we'll pause there, Chair, to take any questions on the work, the grant, the budget, and the work plan. You're on mute, Chair.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry, this is now a session for members of the committee. So do we have questions or comments from members of this board? I think we all are struggling financially, but I think we all recognise the particular challenges facing Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And as part of the recommendations to this meeting, we will be looking at whether we accept the DFT grant of £450,000 for 26-27. Secondly, the funding arrangements for 26-27, recognising that funding arrangements for 27-28 are by their nature provisional, because none of us quite know the financial position we'll all be in as authorities by then. We're looking at accepting the revised work plan for 26-27, again, recognising that projecting beyond that is always a contingent and dependent process, and asking officers initially to work across the constituent authorities to identify a protocol for us to handle the particular situation that Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole finds itself in, being unable to contribute to the funding at this stage, but nonetheless being an important part of our regional framework. Can I start with Roger, please? Councillor Wyborn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm basically very happy with the recommendations. I think the tone of it is that we all want to deal sympathetically with Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch and anybody else who finds themselves in the same situation financially, because we all understand the bigger national picture in which a lot of local authorities find themselves. Clearly, we would need to have some provision for the fact in terms of our decision making and so forth, in terms of the fact that they're unable to contribute. So I would very much support the idea of going away to come up with a protocol on that subject. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other members who want to comment at this stage? Can I thank Martin, Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Roger, to be honest. I think it makes sense, this plan, in terms of making that transition to being a more advisory, convening type role, given the future so uncertain for us all in terms of mayoral authorities, etc. It makes perfect sense, and looking at the work that we want to carry on, it looks like the right choices have been made there. So thank you.
Unless there are any other comments, can I say thank you very much to the Western Gateway officers, but also to all of the officers of our constituent authorities who've been involved in working through this one. I think it says an awful lot about how much commitment there is to collaboration. The way officers have worked together to try and prioritise and to try and find ways to make sure that collective working and ambition continues through into the future of local government, whatever that may look like. There really has been a strong commitment to say talking to each other is vital. We don't want to preempt the decisions of the future authorities, but we do want to make sure that there's something that's fit for purpose for them to inherit, even if they choose at that point to tear it up and do something completely different. It matters that we keep working together on these issues. So I wonder, could I ask if members will be happy to accept the first three recommendations that are on the screen? Ben, you just put your hand up. Oh, no, okay. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendations as set out in 1, 2, 4.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you. So can I just ask, stick your hand up digitally if you accept those first three. Oh, Councillor Bolton, are you wanting to say something or are you voting?
I'm voting.
You're voting. Thank you. Anybody else voting? I think that's one per authority now. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. We should say that Bournemouth Christchurch Pool not being here is really unfortunate. They have something they absolutely have to be at locally. It's not a sign of lack of commitment. Thank you all very much. Can we now move on to the second part, which is recommendation 4, which is the question that we've been working on about what we do with the SIP review, given our changed financial situation. And I think Hannah Fountain is going to say a few words to introduce this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to act as a reminder that our strategic transport plan, which was produced in March 24, and our strategic investment plan that relates a year later in March 25. At the time, there were certain limitations on what we could bring into those plans that were acknowledged by the board as it stood at the time, with a plan made to review those at about this point in time. The main limitations were first that the strategic transport plan was developed under the previous Conservative government and was aligned to the national transport objectives of that time. And secondly, when we came to write the strategic investment plan, we'd only recently had notification of increase in housing delivery requirements on each of our local authorities, and they had not yet got as far as being able to identify sites where that growth might be occurring. So we were unable to sort of fully assess the ability of proposals submitted to support the delivery of that growth, and that was considered to be a very important thing for the board at the time, and so the commitment was made to review the STP and the SIP when those locations were known, so that we could ensure that the proposed schemes prioritised in the SIP supported that growth. Obviously, as we sort of have gone on in time, the surrounding situation has changed, so the STBs will perhaps not be in existence as long as had initially been expected, and the requirement to maintain a strategic transport plan and strategic investment plan, which had been a condition of our funding for the Department of Transport, correspondingly sort of no longer applies. So we might expect that they won't have the sort of longevity perhaps as a regional plan that we had first thought, unless it's continued and maintained by our partner authorities as we go into the next phase of devolution. Anyway, so here we are with a consideration about whether or not and to what degree we now refresh our strategic transport plan and investment plan. And at our last board meeting, officers were charged with doing some investigation to help support a decision around that. So what I'm going to show you is the outcomes of that work that's been shared with our the senior officers as well from each of our local authorities. So what was asked of us last time was to look at the existing strategic investment plan against the distribution of planned housing and employment growth, to determine whether actually potentially the existing plan adequately supports that growth across the whole region. So in the papers I provided, we provided a summary map of that. I'm just showing that on the screen for you now in relation to planned housing growth. So the proposals that are prioritised in our SIP are shown either as polygons, where they cover a sort of area of implementation, or as lines where those relate specifically to a route. The red blobs show where there is planned housing growth, and we can see that There are some areas in our region where there is planned housing growth that are not well aligned with current SIP proposals. So those be in the north part of Gloucestershire here, in Wiltshire, and across in West Dorset. So in answer to the first of the questions that we were asked, or I should perhaps show you the employment distribution as well. That's less the contrast there is less clear, but we still see some misalignment in the same sort of geographical areas around employment growth. The distribution of employment growth is also less certain than that of housing growth. So I'll go back to concentrating on the housing, as that's where the case is clearly cut. So from that, we've determined that the current programme in our SIP doesn't fully support, as it stands, the delivery of planned growth in the region. There are gaps. And we subsequently looked at simply adding a metric to our existing scoring framework and rescoring the proposals, the long list of proposals we've received for the investment plan, to see if simply adding an uplift factor for areas of housing growth would be able to sort of close that gap, and if it would result in a significant amount of change in the prioritised programme. And the sort of initial sensitivity testing on that suggests that there is only a limited effect that can be achieved through that. And part of the reason for that is because there simply aren't enough proposals for these underrepresented areas in the long list for the SIP programme as well. So we then moved towards a situation where if we wanted to fully resolve that issue, we'd need to reopen the scheme for submission of additional proposals. And there's different ways that could be achieved. We could just broadly open to our currently it's our local authority partners and strategic partners like National Highways and Network Rail who've been able to submit proposals. We could reopen that to all of those partners and more if we so desired. Or we could simply seek to invite additional proposals to come through from those underrepresented areas, and then those would go into the pot, and the whole pot would be scored again against a new set of metrics that includes metrics that support the delivery of housing and growth. So all of those options have been explored with the senior officers from a partner at local authorities. I think it's fair to say that there wasn't a single clear direction emerging from those. But in general terms, the options build on one another. So the suggestion and a sort of emerging suggestion from the senior officers that's been captured in the recommendation in your board papers is that we start first with a light touch approach where we apply a metric that looks to kind of improve our that captures the support for growth of housing and employment, and also probably includes some refinement of some of our other metrics to reflect better information and opportunities that have come through since the original analysis was done. And then from there we could look at additional stages, so introducing a weighting factor across the different components of the scoring, so that and we can also better potentially align our the way we've performed our assessment with the current government priorities, and particularly as those come to be expressed through the integrated national transport strategy when that is released. And then our sort of option 4, the more detailed option, is, as I say, if those sort of first 2 stages of refresh haven't delivered the outputs that we're looking for, to open the scheme to new proposals that come in. Obviously, as we kind of increase those, go through those stages, it involves more work and therefore more cost. In the first 2 stages, the light touch and including the weightings, pretty much all of that resource would be internal to Western Gateway, so it would just be in terms of officer time and resourcing. But if we move towards the 4th element, the more detailed review, that would then require local authority and other partners to submit additional schemes into the programme, more detailed assessment, and potentially it may then include a need to include an update of our current strategic environmental assessment of the final programme if that's resulted in significant new schemes being brought in to the programme. So the amount of resource and thus the expenditure enhances as we go through the programmes, and perhaps limit through the stages rather, perhaps limits our ability to then, you know, devote that resource to other things in the work plan. So yes, our recommended approach is to start with option 2 and then escalate to option 3 and 4 if that proves necessary.
Thank you ever so much for that, Hannah. Councillor Plowden.
Thanks, Hannah. The growth strategy is a huge game changer, isn't it? So I agree that we need to do something. But I actually really welcome some feedback from Ben here about how seriously the DFT is going to take this approach, because clearly they're kind of moving to a slightly different model of things. So I really, my thinking personally would actually, I'd be happy to do options 2 and 3, agree that officers carry on with options 2 and 3 straight away. We delegate to the officers any changes in the multi-criteria assessment because that could take us an awful lot of time and an awful lot of debate. So I think I'd be happy to entrust that to officers. I'm quite wary of effectively starting the whole or redoing the whole process again. I only came into this 6 months before or 7 months before it was agreed in December 2024, but my impression was it had taken an enormous amount of work, for which we're all very grateful to get to this point. If there's one or two kind of already more or less worked up schemes, particularly from kind of national level, highways or rail, that we could put into that, then maybe, but I personally would rather focus on beginning to work up some of these schemes. So my feeling is actually options 2 and 3 are great. Get on with them. And if you want to, if you do, and we'll delegate it to officers, but if we do then decide that we want to go to option, if you do then want to recommend we go to option 4, then I'd like to see it brought back to a meeting of this sort. That's my thinking. Obviously other people have got their hands up, but I do think it'd be worth Ben commenting on how seriously this plan is going to be taken by DFT, because I'm reluctant to spend a lot more time and consultants and environmental assessments and all the other stuff, when my feeling is that the DFT, this is going to be less important to the DFT moving forward.
Can we ask for a comment if Ben's in a position to make a comment at this stage on that challenge from Ed, whilst Ben's thinking about what he wants to say? Can I just be clear that the current process, governance process within Western Gateway, is that there is a small member advisory panel that, if you remember, was led by Hannah Young last time, with me as her support act, who worked with Hannah Fountain as the lead officer to develop this with involvement from National Highways and so on. So I think, Ed, am I right in reading what you're saying as that small grouping?
Yeah, I think what we don't want to do is get into a whole big debate and revisit all the multi-criteria assessment, but I do think it could do with a refresh, just to sort of make sure it reflects the new normal and the game-changing kind of growth plans.
And you're recommending an option 2, escalate to option 3 without coming back to us if they can get there in time. If they happen to be in the position that they're just completing option 2 when we next meet, then they can ask us about moving into to escalation to option 3. But if you get ahead with it, get on with option 3 and come back to us for option 4 if we need to, because that has significant programme implications. Sarah Warren.
Hi. So I think I'd support what Ed says of getting on with 2 and 3 together, and then perhaps, if necessary, rediscussing 4. But I suppose from our perspective, the growth in housing and the announcement of growth zones makes this important to take forward. We've got a particular issue that we've got a growth zone in Bath, but there's and whilst we have so we have growth in housing in Bath and North East Somerset, which will be dealt through WECA's plans for transport, but it's possibly less likely that WECA will take account of the cross-border flows that we expect to see from substantial growth in housing in Wiltshire into the growth zone that is Bath city centre. So if that isn't covered through, and the importance of ensuring that that doesn't happen solely through car travel, because that will just simply add to congestion in Bath city centre and prevent growth. Therefore, I'm particularly keen to see an option go forward that will allow us to include thinking around how we can improve bus and train in particular travel across that boundary in a way that I think hasn't yet been accounted for through the existing strategic plan.
Thank you. I think a number of us would unite with, my own authority has its cross-boundary challenges with the local plan authorities within Gloucestershire. So I think we would all identify with some of those cross-boundary challenges. Ben, do you want to say anything in response to Ed?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think Councillor Powell made some really, really good points there, and I think what I would say is that the STP is from my perspective, a very valuable document. It is your sort of baseline evidence document. It's like a working document for yourselves, and it means it does actually have a huge meaning behind it. And I think what I would say, if you sort of go for that do nothing approach, then you kind of lose your momentum, which is not something that you want to do. From a DFT perspective, I mean, as a sponsor, I'm still here, so we do take it seriously. Hopefully, that kind of reflects the fact that we are still taking it seriously and want to work alongside you all, because I do absolutely recognise the value that STBs bring, and just because the funding's sort of drying up for various reasons doesn't mean that the momentum has to stop. Or that our collaboration stops, because that's certainly the case from the sponsors this end. We're very keen to keep working with you. I think what I would say is that obviously previously, with the full amount of funding that you got beforehand, the option 4, I suppose, was the one that you had sort of had to do as a sort of a yearly update, because that was a sort of a condition of the funding. Now that's not in place anymore, so you've kind of got this flexibility and autonomy to kind of make a decision on what you want to do. Just as a sort of a general opinion, that light touch recommendation that certainly sort of seems sensible. I think you've got to weigh up the sort of the financial pros and cons of that as well when you look at the other work that's got to be happening alongside it. So obviously you don't want to opt for something that's really, really expensive when your funding has been reduced slightly. So I think everything you've said so far makes complete sense, and we would absolutely support you on that. I think there's still you've got a spending review in 4 years' time. It's worth working towards that with some of the schemes. I think that's what I would say, is that we can never guarantee funding, and it's not just across DFT that the financial position is difficult. It's right across the country at the moment, across all departments. So it's it is a difficult situation to be in, but I would recommend that you keep the momentum going. That would certainly be my sort of advice on that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a couple of questions which are just from my own interest. So the numbers that in sort of the housing allocations there, in terms of the model that was presented to us, does that reflect the current and recent NPPF? In which case, how have we actually put those numbers into locations? Because I know in Wiltshire, for instance, we've got a draft local plan, but currently with the government inspectorate, which does not reflect the uplift that the new NPPF requires on us. We're going to have to start a new local plan very, very soon, later this year. which ultimately will do, but we may come up with different locations. So that's one question. The other question is, obviously, there's also this priority now going to be given to houses near rail stations. Is that reflected in the model? And also to Sarah's point about cross-border issues, but she's aware that in Wiltshire we're trying to make the business case for a new station at Corsham, which sort of plays into this as well. I'm not quite sure where that is in terms of our STP, etc. So that's just a few questions to throw out there.
Okay, I'll try and take those in turn, but might need a bit of help remembering them when we get down the line. The first question about how we've identified the areas for growth, that's come from each of our partner local authorities based on their best available evidence. So we collated that information over Christmas in response to the request from the board at the beginning of December. So we basically went to each authority and asked them for their current plan. So in terms of Wiltshire, that is what's gone out as your Reg 19 recently, and is based on the housing numbers that you were expecting to deliver through that. So you're right that, and if you're back to the drawing board with needing to accommodate new growth, that won't be in that map I've showed you or in the assessment, because we have to take a point in time assessment, really, I think, of what's expected. So that's how we've developed that and collated that. And I suppose that, had we had a long-term future, we would have refreshed that I think the cycle we were looking at was every 2 years for once in operation. But obviously we're just looking at this one update here. Sorry, I've already gone your second question. Can you just remind us? Sorry.
It was around sort of housing being a priority near rail stations.
Oh, yes.
And then leading into the fact that we're trying to get a station in Corsham.
And the cross-boundary movements.
And that has an implication for the Baines cross-border issue as well.
Yeah. So in general terms, in the SIP, rail schemes are well represented, both those at stations and enhancements in station areas, and in terms of service provision and new infrastructure on rail, because Network Rail submitted a lot of those types of schemes to our proposals, as did local authorities themselves. So generally there's good confidence about those, but in order to assess the schemes in the SIP, we needed to have a certain level of information available. So we had to have some cost estimates, even if those had error bounds with them, and we had to have some degree of estimate of the benefit and area of benefit. And if schemes were not sufficiently progressed that they were able to provide that information for assessment, we were unable to assess them. So I don't recall off the cuff whether Corsham Station was in there, but I think it might have been one of those ones that fell into that category of we don't have the figures yet, and was going to be one of those ones that were forthcoming further down the line. And in fact, quite a lot of national highway schemes were in that category because they hadn't progressed through the RIS assessment process far enough that they were able to make figures public to be included for the assessment. So I guess you could say that would be another argument for kind of reopening for more submissions. So the option 4 was to enable those additional schemes to come through. And to some degree, that's true too of cross-boundary and cross-border schemes. So all of our assessment metrics are on a regional wide scale, so we kind of ignore borders, and in fact we look beyond. We've got a buffer zone beyond the Western Gateway boundary as well to pick up schemes and assets in other areas. So none of our assessment has been truncated at a border, and that would be the case also with the housing and employment growth support metric. So we would, a scheme that was proposed, a proposal for Bath, if it benefited the development area in Wiltshire, it would count into the score for that Bath scheme, and vice versa. So anything that's been proposed near to a border would sort of benefit in that way, as if that border didn't exist effectively. But it really does depend whether or not we have received schemes into the long list proposal in those border areas, or we haven't. So unless we go to option 4, where we reopen for additional submissions, we are working with what we've got already.
Thank you.
From the chair, before I call in Councillor Warren and then Councillor Plowden, if you recall at our previous meetings, we've discussed this question of how we should handle a SIP refresh. And there was a very clear steer from the bulk of the membership that we wanted, well, there were some who wanted to do nothing, but there was a very clear steer towards the light touch approach. The officers have gone away and worked up what that means. And if you remember at the time, Hannah was saying fairly clearly to us, she thought we should be going to a heavier touch, to a fuller review. And members at that stage were taking the view that we should do the lightest we felt would enable us to progress, given the reduced funding and given the uncertainties. I think what I'm now hearing is that now Hannah's done that initial paper, showing us the mismatch between the SIP and what is emerging as the growth hotspots in the region. And as we're all increasingly working through what the implications of those local growth plans are for our transportation, we're beginning to feel that, Hannah, you were right, and that we need to be somewhere further along the line from the light touch. Where I'm currently hearing, and maybe members want to tell me that I'm not hearing correctly, is that we're accepting option 2, but with officers having the authority to move straight on into option 3, if needed, and report back to the next meeting. And I think that doesn't exclude the possibility of us saying, when you've done all you can within the current system, we may nonetheless look at it and say, yeah, actually, Hannah was 100% right, and we need to go back several blocks and reopen the submissions and do a detailed review. But that may be a question for the next meeting, when we have seen just how far the process can go without that. And that would then also involve a work programme review, because it would start to take significant additional resource and a longer timeline. So it may be what we end up doing is saying, we'll do a light touch plus, i.e. a 3, and recognise that that's only going to get us so far, and that we then need to commission a fuller review, but as a have the light touch through, the recommended 3, light touch plus, if you like, as a sort of interim holding review position to keep us going. So that may be where we end up. Councillor Warren and then Councillor Plowden.
Well, so some of a member of the Baines officer team didn't receive the papers until yesterday, so we haven't really had a lot of time to prepare. But I think that from our perspective, I can tell you that the Corsham station is not currently mentioned in the SIP, and from our perspective, it really is essential that it features, because of the development of new housing in Wiltshire and the congestion we have on that access into Bath, and the risk that WECA may not consider that a priority, and the requirement to grow. So I'm not clear. I mean, I don't know if anyone on the call knows which option we would need to get to a point, or what process would need to happen to get to a point where Corsham Station were included. It would help to understand that. If you're asking me which option to go for, it would depend on what the answer to that question is.
It would need to be option 4, sorry, or some degree of option 4. So maybe not necessarily a halt, but if Corsham Station was never submitted in the first place, then obviously a review of the scoring criteria would not make it, if it's not there, it's not there. So it would need to be an opportunity to bring it forward. But I don't remember the full long list, Sarah. So I know it's not in the priority shortlist, but whether or not it was ever suggested as part of the long list, I'd need to go back and check on that.
I think whatever the position is on Corsham, I think the changed housing numbers have so changed. Remember, the original SIP submissions from everybody predate the coming of the Labour government, and therefore the dramatic increase. So we are all going to have schemes, whether it's Corsham or not, that have that transformative impact that have come into from being a twinkle in campaigners' eyes or a twinkle in councillors' eyes through to being absolutely critical to deliver the growth strategy and the housing strategy in a very short space of time. That's been the whole point, get on your front foot and reorganise. I think what the officers are asking us today to do is not to decide that we won't do a full review, but to say, just get on and see how far you can get, and we'll see the scale of the gaps. And it may be that in some places we look at it and we go, well, actually, that's near enough. But there are some places where the thinking has changed so much that we may need to do some sort of full review of reopening and submissions for those places where the world has changed dramatically. So I'm not sure in a sense we need to see, I suspect. We've had a first step paper from Hannah. Another 3 months of work will get us to knowing exactly where the gaps are. Councillor Plowden.
I think I'm going to say something similar to both you and Sarah, which is I would be happy to go straight to option 3 rather than, and as part of preparing for 3 months' time, we look particularly if there are any schemes like Corsham or anything else at a sufficient level that have come up to a sufficient level of detail to be analysed, because absolutely no point in opening a whole to schemes all over the place when they're really not at the right level. And I would actually focus that very strongly on the 3 areas that have been identified where where things have changed quite a lot, which I think at North Gloucestershire, the kind of Wiltshire near Bath, and was it West Dorset. So rather than do a sweep of the whole of however many councils and counties we focus on the places where we've identified there's a bit of a gap. And then at least we could come back in 3 months' time, having done maybe 2, be underway on 3, and hopefully some much more clearly list of any schemes that are serving those 2 areas where 3 areas where we feel that there's been a bit of a game-changing direction from central government. And hopefully have a bit more of an actual costed plan of what that might involve if we were to allow some of those schemes that particularly serve those areas in. So and then we're able to make quite a good judgment. Now, whether or not that's possible in 3 months, Hannah, you'll let us know. But that would be, I think, a good scenario, is not to try and be too emergent, to actually say, well, we want to do 2 and 3, and we want to be really quite focused on what 4 might be and be able to cost it. Or at least have some outline costs for it. Thanks.
I'm going to suggest something a bit different from that, Ed. I think the recommendation is to move straight to option 3 and report to the next meeting, rather than just saying, oh, we've identified 3 areas. I think we need to say to each of the constituent authorities, if when you go home and look at the schemes that will be rescored within this process, and there is something that is clearly significant enough, whose significance has changed fundamentally because of your changing growth strategy, and you've got it in sufficient detail, then let us know, and that way we're letting everybody identify if there is something that is so critical that it should now be included and is sufficiently evaluated. So it's not a general what's your shopping list, it's a much more focused piece of work. I'm mindful of the time, I'm managing this
Chris,
meeting badly. Yeah.
Can I just come back on that? I'm happy with that approach, as long as it's a really high bar to putting new schemes in, and not just wish lists.
No, high bar. Can I take Councillor Smith and then Hannah Fountain, and then hopefully we can move to a decision?
Yeah, very, very briefly, Chris, thanks. I'm very happy with that approach. I mean, I was at a meeting discussing Corsham Rail Station just a week or so ago. They have had numerous business cases written over the years, which have always been positive. It's just trying to attract the funding to actually make the project happen. So I'm sure that they are one of these projects that's in a position to be considered very seriously. I'm not sure what the history has been in the past as to why it hasn't made it onto the SIP for the Western Gateway, but I'm absolutely sure that there's a good case to look at there. So I will certainly get back to that group and make sure that they're going to be engaging with this process. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Briefly, and then we might move to a decision before everybody has to go to their next meeting.
I just wanted to touch briefly on the slight difference between options 2 and 3 and the potential governance arrangements around that, because we can definitely crack on with option 2 and associated works very quickly, because that is all objective metrics and measures. As soon as you start to introduce a weighting on different, valuing different criteria differently, that becomes more of a politically driven decision. And we can certainly make some recommendations around that, and we could explore that with governance from senior officers from the constituent authorities. But that may be one where you might wish to take a view as a board, as a collective, or as a subset of the board in the way that Councillor Hannah Young provided before, because at that point we start to debate whether or not, for example, decarbonisation is more important than economic growth, is more important than accessibility, and so on. And it starts to bring in that subjective and more political dimension. So my feeling is, well, obviously I haven't had a chance to discuss it with James, is that us alone, officers alone, would struggle to move all the way through option 3 without that additional level of governance and guidance to make sure it aligns with what you want.
You're not being asked to do that. You're being asked, if we move towards option 3, we have the advisory group. You remember last year at the AGM, we identified lead members across all of the areas of work. So we have a lead member process in place to assist you, and you have your chair and vice chair who can assist you. Okay. And we have informal mechanisms through which we can obviously work with the officers of the industries, but through them or more directly, the members are able to talk to each other. So I hope we can move forward within the time frame. So it's light. I know some people prefer to stick to light touch 2. Some people, and I'm hearing a lot, are saying 3, which is light touch plus, and we report back. And I think you have that choice. I think I'm proposing from the chair that we do option 3, delegated to the officers in consultation with lead members and reporting back to the next board. And in the interim, authorities indicating whether they've got anything critical that meet those criteria without being absolutely critical because of the changing in growth strategy approach and sufficiently well worked up. And I think, is that Ed what you wanted to move? Go on, Ed.
I'm not going to repeat all of that. I'm either going to move it or second it. So I'm happy to, if that was you moving it, I'm happy to second that approach.
Thank you very much. Are people willing to vote on that now? If so, could they vote by the usual manner of sticking your digital hand up, please? That is really helpful, everybody. Thank you very much.
No, it's not everybody, Chris. I voted against. Thank you.
Again, you'd go for option 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Can we note that that's a majority decision?
Yeah.
Thank you all very much indeed. That I think is the end of today's business, except there's an AOB slot, which we don't use officially, but I am going to use it. You have just seen how invaluable Hannah Fountain is to us. And I have to report with sadness that she is leaving us in about 8 days' time and going to work for WECA. And our loss is their gain. You've steered us through the whole SIP process, the strategic plan process, and a whole load of other things in the work programme. And I think we need to record in the minutes our thanks to you, Hannah. And I think it's fitting that you ended the meeting with us recognising that probably you were right and we were wrong.
I always love to end a meeting that way. Thanks, Chris. But thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to work with you all. And I'm not going far. In fact, probably not even moving desks. So I'm sure I'll be kind of providing some ongoing support to the team, particularly as they have to make sense of my SIP and STP notes going forward to do this new element of work. So yeah, I won't be far away. And thanks very much for all your support and help and guidance through that time.
Roger, is your hand up for a reason, or is it up because it's a legacy?
It's a legacy hand. I'll take it down.
Thank you very much. In which case, is there anything else that we need to discuss today? And can we finalise by saying we are, I think on behalf of the team, apologising for the fact that the paper's not all the links got to everybody, and not all the papers got to everybody, and we'll do better next time. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.